This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. This week I've been thinking about celebrity weddings, a dark comedy about moral lines, and how pop culture has taught millennial women how to behave. They sound completely unrelated, but all three left me with the same question. How much of what we call personal choice comes from seeing the same script so many times that we begin to mistake it for what we actually wanted? Now, before I dive in today, since you're already here with me, and if you are on YouTube right now, by any chance, are you? If you are, maybe just hit that little subscribe button. Do you see it right there? Just click that little subscribe button and subscribe to Note to Self. Thank you so much. Alrighty, guys, kicking off today. So you know you've had a freaking crazy day when you start your morning with a coffee on an empty stomach. Let me tell you, there's nothing that brings me more joy when I get up and I'm feeling a little spicy and I decide, tell you what, I'm going to treat myself this morning and have a coffee on an empty stomach. Skip breakfast. Well, actually, I never skip breakfast. I just have breakfast after my coffee. So, crazy times here in Brooklyn, New York this morning, but I was just feeling a little wild. What can I say? You're in your 30s as well when you no longer drink coffee on an empty stomach. I stopped doing that when I realized how bad it was for me. And just sometimes you just want to wake up and feel that little coffee kick and just know it's not great for you, but that's how I felt this morning. But actually, this week has been fucking mental. I don't know what it is about this Mercury retrograde, but it has absolutely sent me on a goddamn spiral. I have been an absolute nightmare to live with. My fuse is at an all-time low. And as the internet kindly put it, I'm going to tell my kids about Mercury retrograde of July 2026. I will never forget it. I also had my period, so add that to the mix. Was feeling nuts. So if anyone else has been spiraling out of control these last few weeks, please know you're not alone. And let me tell you, I think it's over though, as we kind of make our way out of this crazy retrograde and into one of the funnest seasons, which is the Leo season. I have a lot of Leo people in my life. And my pattern app described this time as the time to let your heart speak. It's the time to tap into what your heart feels when it's completely uninhibited. And I am so ready for that because I feel like this week was all about questioning what my heart wants. I mean, not what my heart wants, because don't freak out, everyone. My heart knows it wants to be with Jeffrey. I'm not talking about that. One thing I do know, it's just what do I want with my life? And I think I've brought that up multiple times before. So ready for some uninhibited fun. Thanks, Leos. And just to show me what is next, because I feel like we've come out of this big chapter of just renewal and rebirth and letting go of things. And now we're going into something new and fresh. So let's kick things off, though, with my pop culture picks of the week. So I've been thinking a lot about celebrity weddings. And I don't know if it's just me or does it feel like everyone's getting married right now? Definitely in the celebrity world. It's kind of wild. We had Zendaya and Tom Holland quietly confirmed that they got married. Still waiting for pictures from that one. Dua Lipa and Callum Turner celebrating in Italy with her gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful selection of looks and just gorgeous wedding. They're so fucking chic. It's unbelievable. Taylor and Travis pulling off a wedding that was somehow public, but also so not public at the same time. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that they got married at MSG. I truly thought that was a front and that there must have been a small private wedding somewhere, but to have confirmation there. And Gabriette and Maddie Healy getting married in the most Gabriette and Maddie Healy way possible. God love them. It was so old Hollywood, but not old Hollywood. It was dark glamour old Hollywood. Very fun from the pictures we've seen so far. Anyways, it's wedding fever. And because I myself am also engaged, my ring is currently getting resized. Don't worry, guys. Don't freak out. I've been thinking a lot about weddings and really just the whole tradition behind them. Because when it comes to planning a wedding, I am often asking myself, what are we doing for us compared to what are we doing because we've been fed this idea of what a wedding should be? I don't know if I have all the answers. Well, I know I don't. But I do know that my favorite weddings that I have seen are the ones where the couple really designs an experience around who they are. So, for example, Gabriette's wedding looks. She worked with the Paris-based brand Mateo Fecal. I think that's how you say it. It's fecal matter in English. Love that. I had not heard of this brand until recently because they've done quite a few looks. They did that beautiful like winged goddess look that Zendaya wore as part of the Odyssey press tour. But they have the brand has this very dystopian feel to it. And now that I've discovered them, I fucking love it. It really is walking art. So Gabriette had 3 looks that she worked on with them, but my standouts were the wedding dress and the kind of after party look. The looks were just this true depiction of dark glamour with these Victorian undertones. And I loved that she did something so different, but it was so clearly her style. And I quote her saying, weddings, what did she say? Like, wedding fashion can be whatever you want it to be, which I love that. And she just made her wedding looks feel unmistakably her. However, with all these celebrity weddings and these people who probably have endless budgets, there's a lot of space for inspiration while also trying to keep yourself from comparing your plan to theirs. And I think it's really easy to fall down the rabbit hole with wedding planning, thinking that you need all these things when you don't. I mean, what is something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue actually mean? Well, I Googled it. It's an old tradition that started in Victorian society where each item served as a specific protective charm for the bride. So do we really need all that now? No. My other wedding hot take, and this might be controversial, but I'll say it anyways. We do not need bridesmaids and groomsmen. I will not be 35 years old standing at the altar with my closest gal pals behind me. I'm a grown-ass woman. I can do this by myself. And I also don't think you should put your friends through that. Like, no one really wants to do it. And look, I actually do think it was cute in our 20s. The first weddings that we went to, it was so exciting. It was your first friend getting married. You wanted to do all the things. And I was a bridesmaid in my 20s and loved it. But like, when we're in our 30s and my partner's in his 40s, I'm not going to put my friends up there. It just all feels so cringe to me. So I have one directive for my friends for our wedding, which is have fun and look hot, period. So as I go down my own wedding journey, I'll for sure take my fellow listeners on the ride, but I can share some tea, some exclusive tea. Jeffrey and I have officially chosen our wedding planner and our location, and we are getting married in, drumroll please, France next year. Oh my God, that face. Say hello to your French bride. Me. It was actually very cute because our first date was at a French restaurant. So I feel like our story knew where it was going before we even did. But as we start this planning process, the one thing I know for certain is I want our wedding to feel like us, whatever that may be, and to really make decisions with Jeffrey on what represents us. And I just keep asking myself that. Which parts of this are actually ours, and which parts have we just inherited from wedding culture without ever actually questioning them? And that's exactly what my next pop culture pick of the week is, the film The Drama, which made me think about it just in a much darker context. So this week I watched the movie The Drama with Robert Pattinson and Zendaya. This did come out April earlier this year, so I'm a bit late to the game, but here we are. So it's a romantic dark comedy, and the film follows the story of Charlie and Emma, who are planning their wedding. And a few days before their wedding, Charlie learns something very explosive about Emma, and the film follows their spiral. So a quick content note and major spoiler warning for The Drama. This following section, discusses planned school violence, gun violence, and harm to a child. So if this is not something you want to hear today, skip ahead to the girl on girl section. The timestamp I'll put in the show notes. Now, the crux of the film sits around a game Emma and Charlie play with their 2 best friends who are also a couple. The 4 of them have to answer, what is the worst thing you have ever done? And you learn that Emma, as a teenager, planned a school shooting, although she never went through with it. The film has understandably been criticized by gun violence survivors who feel this subject should not be used as material for a dark comedy. I think that criticism deserves to sit beside any conversation about whether this film succeeds. And as a viewer, I was unbelievably surprised at how the director and writer of this film was able to make one of the darkest parts of American history and America right now into a dark romantic comedy, which to me actually carried some really important themes and strong messages about this subject. So when watching the film, the drama, the biggest question you ask yourself is, what is your line for wrongdoing? And I feel like I'm a pretty compassionate person. And I think as a society, we really should spend more time trying to rehabilitate people and provide mental health support rather than ostracizing people. And obviously, there is a line on where my patience goes with that. But as a human, I try and take that approach generally. What I thought was interesting in the film is that it's circulating around an action that Zendaya's character Emma never actually did. And the moral dilemma here, the most obvious to me, is that her friend Rachel, who at the same dinner shared the worst thing she had ever done, was actually far more awful to me. Rachel admits that as a child, she locked a disabled neighbor, who was a child as well, in an abandoned trailer overnight. And she went home, and a search party ended up having to go out looking for him the next day, and she said nothing. She justified the behavior that obviously if they didn't end up finding him, which they did, she would have said something. Yet Rachel considers Emma completely unforgivable for something that she planned but never actually carried out, while showing no accountability for the harm that she actually caused someone. So the moral dilemma is that Rachel thinks Emma, Zendaya's character, is the worst person in the entire world, unforgivable for what she had planned to do, yet never did, but doesn't seem to have any accountability for her own actions. So it begs the question, what's worse? Planning something horrific and never doing it, or doing something cruel and refusing to take accountability for it? It really starts to mess with your head, because you have to ask yourself, what's the worst thing you've ever done? And do you think you should be forgiven for it? And I thought about it myself. What's the worst thing I have ever done? We've all hurt someone, whether it was intentional or unintentional. We've all said things we've regretted. We've all been somewhere we probably shouldn't have been. The worst? I really struggled to answer that. And it's not because I'm not being on my high horse. I think it's just because our definition of the worst is different for everyone. And I actually think the idea of the worst thing feels too neat. And it becomes this benchmark that almost lets you excuse all the other little smaller cruelties beneath it because, it wasn't as bad as this worst thing. And I think morality is maybe less about defining the single most worst thing and more about whether we're able to take accountability for the harm that we've caused. And I think the hardest part of morality is how easily we judge someone else's thoughts while finding reasons to excuse our own. Because there's plenty of things I've done in my life that I'm probably should have, that was not very nice. I remember in primary school bullying this girl that we were friends with, where it was every Thursday my friends and I said, this is, we're playing this game this day, and because you don't watch this TV show, you can't play with us that day. That still sits with me, and I feel so bad because that's an awful thing to do to another child. But I don't define something as the worst, because I think it's better to just take accountability and know I wouldn't do that again. But what I think is interesting about this film, the drama, is seeing everyone's different moral lines. Charlie, her fiance, begins to fall apart throughout the film. Charlie is clearly an intellectual, and he seems to believe that if he can rationalize Emma's thinking, he might be able to accept it. But all she can initially tell him is that she was bullied, and that explanation is not enough for him. I actually kind of resonate with his understanding, because I feel like when intense things happen to me, I just need all the information to be able to grasp what is happening and to be able to understand it. So I thought it was really incredibly well written, his reaction, albeit it was very heightened because this is a dark comedy. But I could really understand needing all the facts. So kind of as a viewer, you're taken on this journey that starts out as this beautiful little meet cute romance. You do not expect the film to go this way. And then it becomes this very tense drama, and then finally kind of folds into this dark comedy. And I think dark comedy can be a really powerful type of filmmaking because it creates enough distance and absurdity for us to examine subjects that we might otherwise avoid. And the question is whether the film earns the right to create that distance with this particular subject, because that is something I still don't have the answer to. I was hesitant to even speak about it on this podcast because I know how awful this topic is and how loaded it can be for people. But there was a reason I did bring it up, and there was something else that the drama hit on. And it's been playing on my mind all week. And this is what really the podcast is about today. And it comes back to a topic I spoke about last week, which is cultivation theory. Once you learn cultivation theory, it becomes impossible to consume anything innocently. I cannot unsee it. So as a reminder, cultivation theory is this idea that repeated exposure to a particular version of reality can gradually influence what we begin to see as normal. Specifically, it was looking at the reality that's depicted in television. So what we consume in media is kind of how I look at it. So really any form of media, from film, television, reality TV, the news, video games, books, whatever. In the film, the characters are trying to understand why and how Emma even had this idea. And Emma explains, well, it's not necessarily a unique idea. We live in a country where this happens often. Charlie grasps onto this as the intellectual who wants to understand this. This is a tactic he can actually understand. He can understand why. And by saying that exposure to things like this as a young person drives you to think that this isn't even an option. And that's exactly what cultivation theory is. And it made me wonder if that was what the director was trying to get at. This constant exposure we have to violent acts, does that permeate into society and influence the way people behave? I don't have the answer, but it's a question that is worth examining. And I would love to know if that was what he was trying to get us to think about as viewers. But really, going back to the drama as a whole, I actually really did like it. I think it was incredibly well shot. The actors are amazing. I really like a movie that makes you question your own values and morals, and it makes you think about society and culture at large. And I think the most powerful stories do not always tell us what to think. Sometimes they just quietly teach us what we consider is normal. And I just think that film really did that, and it has continued to sit with me since watching it. Now to my third topic today. So, the drama asks what happens when violent ideas become part of the cultural atmosphere. Girl on Girl asks what happens when the ideas that are being absorbed about women themselves, what we should look like, what we should tolerate, what we should want, and who we should perform for, what happens when we absorb these ideas as truth. So before I move into the book, a quick note about this section is that I discuss pornography, sexual consent, and my experience of saying yes when I truly probably didn't want to. So take care of yourself. Come back to this conversation if you can't hear it today, or skip ahead to the end. Sorry that this is a heavier episode, I guess you could say, but there's some important parts in this. I think if you're able to hear it at the present moment. So recently I finished reading this book called Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. And it's by the author Sophie Gilbert. Sophie writes a series of what you could describe as short essays, taking you as the reader through feminism and the treatment of women through the 1990s up until today. Gilbert examines how portrayals of women in media tracked alongside, reinforced, and helped shaped the way women were treated in society at that time. Which is, no surprise, what I'm going to say is the definition of cultivation theory. See, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is a dangerous spiral, but it's also very empowering. And what she says in the book isn't necessarily new, but it's the way she packages it that's really eye-opening to me. And I'm going to call out some chapters that really stuck with me. So in the book, Girl on Girl, Sophie speaks about she has a whole chapter on the porn industry and the effect it has had on the treatment of women, specifically looking at the aughts and how much the commodification of women was really at the forefront of porn and really any media that we consumed at that time. Female characters in the blockbusters were often there to just be dumb, hypersexualized bimbos, or they were brutally killed off in horror films. The films of that time were all about male bonding, fraternal quests, and juvenile misogyny. Think of these movies, and this is all going to make sense to you. American Pie, House of Wax, Superbad, and Anchorman. I Googled the top films of the aughts, and those were some of the ones that came up. Not House of Wax, but that was one that really stuck with me for a popular horror film. And I have such a distinct recollection of Paris Hilton being in that and just how brutally she was killed off. But all the movies were just about groups of men. And I was like, it just had a giant ping in my head that, oh my gosh, this was the media we were consuming. But as Sophie points out in the book, with every era, we almost see this seesaw effect, because the early aughts, where it was a lot of male stories, led to women having much more visibility and voices in media. As we entered the 2010s, we started to see shows like Girls by Lena Dunham, Scandal with Kerry Washington, with Kerry being the first Black woman to lead a network drama in nearly 40 years, all under the Shonda Lamb universe, which is all her shows have such strong female characters. Fleabag by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and Insecure by Issa Rae, just to name a few. And surprise, surprise, shows that tell female stories did really well. No fucking shit. And they're still doing really well. But I think for millennial women that grew up in the aughts, there is a lot of untangling that has to be done. And in the book, Sophie quotes these writers, Nona Willis, Aronowitz, and Catherine Angel, who ask a question that really stayed with me. How can women untangle what we want from what we have only ever seen on screen? Where does indoctrination end and exploration begin? I spent most of my 20s asking whether men desired me, and almost none of it asking whether I desired what was happening to me. I rarely asked the question what felt good for me, because almost none of the media I consumed as a young adult asked that question. And with it, young men were rarely asking me that question, because they were basing their sexual experiences off porn that was written by and for men. And over the last few years, I've watched many of the millennial women in my life, myself included, asking different questions. What do I want sexually? What have I said yes to in the past? And what does it mean to find my no? I have noticed that some women feel more able to explore these questions when they are in a committed relationship that feels safe. That has certainly been true for me. And I see this as this seesaw effect. In the aughts, the media told women that we were there to be desirable. So maybe we said yes more than we wanted. But now the seesaw has switched. And we're asking ourselves, what do I like and want? And I find myself using my no much more, because I think so much of sex has been shaped by male fantasies in porn. And as women, we've just become really good at reshaping those for our own purposes. And over the last 3 years, I've really been diving into this in therapy and facing some really difficult truths. I often said yes to things I never really wanted, but I felt like I didn't have a choice because that was what my role was. And society was telling me that I was just there to be desirable. My worth was in my desirability. But now, as I've become more comfortable in myself and I feel safe enough to say no, I finally have the space to discover what my yes actually means. So reading this book and hearing other women asking these questions and visibly having spoken to many women and opening up to them about my own experience over the last few years, and them also coming to me saying, oh my gosh, yes, I'm going through the same thing, trying to untangle what I actually want sexually. And I feel like there's this just shift happening with women really taking their power back. And in Girl on Girl, the author Sophie says, throughout the aughts, it often felt as though girls were being conditioned by popular culture to perform sex for social kudos rather than to explore it for their own fulfillment. She continues quoting author Ariel Levy, who wrote in Female Chauvinistic Pigs, while it would be weird for a teen girl to pursue sexual gratification, it is crucial that she seems sexy, raunching, willing, and wild. And that is the contradiction. The arts had the representation that if you were a woman who wanted sex, you were a slut. But if you seemingly didn't want it, you were a prude. Look at the depictions of Samantha and Charlotte in Sex and the City. They played two very distinct cultural tropes. No fucking shit. We were so lost and confused and wondering what I actually wanted. Look what we were fucking being shown. And I loved Sex and the City. I still watch Sex and the City, but I take it for also what it is. And I think there's also beautiful messages in it that are absolutely very empowering. And the women are also empowered sexually, but I do think there was that the one who's really sexually promiscuous and wild, and the one who's very prude, and look at the one who wants to get married and says she'll find love is the one who's Charlotte, who played the prude. And that's that story that we were continuously being told that I spoke about a few weeks ago in the article Emily Ratajkowski wrote, which was about if I stayed pure, I would find love. And I just feel like there's just this, this topic really riles me up because I get angry that I think that maybe if we had had better stories, I would have chosen for myself differently at times. And I've had to really forgive myself and know that we have to have this dialogue now to make it better for the young women that are coming after us. But just this idea that girls were being conditioned by popular culture to like perform sex instead of actually exploring it for our own fulfillment. Like if you reading this chapter was like being in my teenage brain's head. It was so, I guess you could say triggering, but also like more empowering because I'm like, oh my God, I'm not alone in this. And not that I thought I was, but just seeing someone else write it down and seeing all these incredible female authors exploring this topic really does make you feel less alone. And I think it's just so, so, so important to talk about. And the more we understand it, the more power we have. And like I said, there's the seesaw effect. And I think I have gone from saying yes and being desirable to being like, well, fuck that and fuck no. And I'm trying to find my middle ground. And thankfully I have a really beautiful, supportive partner who's been on the journey with me. But it is a really difficult one. So my heart goes out to people and women specifically that are going through this as well. And I am always here to talk about it as I figure this out too. But really this book was just, this was just the tip of the iceberg, this topic, because the book goes into the girl boss era. And as millennial women, I think we've really had some hard fucking eras because we finally get through the aughts. We start to see things getting better in the 2010s with more female stories. And then we're hit with Girlboss. And Girlboss was never liberation. It was capitalism repackaged in millennial pink. I remember moving to New York in 2015, and those next 5 years were some of the height of Girlboss. We had Glossier, we had Nasty Gal, we had Away, we had Outdoor Voices, and who could forget the pinnacle? The Wing. One of my friends was a member at the Wing. And for those that were not in New York at the time, the Wing was a women's only co-working space. It was membership only, and it was a social club. It was the epitome of manifesting your girl boss era. The millennial hyper aesthetic pastel pink was slashed. It was like lathered over the walls there. They would have book readings by female authors and all these different events. There was a nail bar. I think there was a blowout bar. And I would go to events there and you would just feel like you were in it. And you were working, you were building whatever you were building and you were killing it. You were in your, quote, girl boss era. Then you'd pop down the street to the Glossier pop-up that was around the corner and get your natural no-look makeup. And I remember going to that when there was no line and you'd pop up and early days of all these brands. All I wore was Outdoor Voices as I went to my SkyTang, my favorite yoga studio, shout out, still go there. But it was just this at the time you felt empowered, Girl boss is actually so tricky and loaded. And it's really demeaning in its own terminology because we don't have a term boy boss, yet somehow we came up with girl boss. And when I think about it, it's just capitalism packaged in a pink way. And we did not escape the system. We just landed on a prettier desk inside it. And this whole American fucking dream that you work your ass off and you make your way to the top is just fucking bullshit. And I think a lot of millennial women I know are starting to feel this and question and say, I'm not buying into this model anymore. And how can I do something that is for me on my terms without fucking killing myself for someone else? work-wise. And this brings me back to cultivation theory. Representation does not mechanically dictate how we behave, but repeated cultural scripts can change what women learn to see as normal, and I think what society learns to expect from us. And again, it's this strange seesaw. Moments that look like empowerment fulfilled by our rights being stripped away. We, a few years ago, watched our right to choice be taken away from us. So in this weird way, have we come back full circle? All I can think is that if we've gone this way, then we're going to come back out of it and maybe more empowerment will come. But I don't like that it's this continued roundabout. I want to keep going in a positive direction. And maybe us asking these questions and recognizing how pop culture can shape us is how we take that power into our own hands. I recommend, though, that every woman should read this book. It really opens your eyes to what we've been exposed to. And as I said, I think knowledge is power, and that's not going away. Because if you're aware of what's happening, you can find the power within it. So as we wrap up today, as always, your girl loves a thread. So the thread today is clearly cultivation theory. I have a drink every time I say it. I won't, because I haven't had a drink in a month. Wow, so proud of myself. Props to me. He. I haven't even been trying. It just kind of happened. But anyways, everything is fucking cultivation theory. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. This week, it showed up in 3 completely different places. The weddings, which we think we want, the moral lines we use to decide who deserves forgiveness, and the ideas millennial women have absorbed about sex, desirability, and success. And my point is to not stop watching films, reading magazines, strolling Instagram, or finding inspiration in someone else's wedding. I love pop culture. This podcast is about pop culture. I think it has an incredible place for storytelling, and it is it's art, and I love telling stories. Culture will always shape us. I think it's recognizing how it's shaping us, and it gives us a chance to notice when that influence is happening and if it's on our own terms. I think the most uncomfortable question you can ask yourself is, do I actually want this, or was I taught to want this? And maybe we can't escape every story we've been sold, and I think that's okay. But we can notice when the script starts sounding like someone else and not like ourselves. And then we get to actually ask ourselves, is this the script we want to live by? So I leave you with that today, folks. And as always, share the podcast with your friends, with the girlies, with the ladies, with the women. And I'll speak to you all next week. I'm off to lunch with my gals. Bye.